Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to give you my background to this book. Back when I was an incoming freshman in my high school, we had summer reading books, and this was one of them, about a boy. And I didn't like it. In my younger mind, it wasn't a good book. I had to make a timetable of how many chapters I had to read a week to finish it by September. But then, 2 months ago, I found it again and reread it, because my memory said it wasn't all that bad. And it was a great book. Way better than I remembered it. So, remember this. Some books age like fine wine. And others age like fruit. And with that, let's get right to it. The cover is pretty good, actually. It shows two pairs of lower legs, who I assume are Will and Marcus's. It's symbolic, and by the end of the book you understand it, but it won't make sense at first glance. Also, it has a set of eyes, which I hope aren't the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, because I don't want to have to deal with Nick obsessed with other people's lives Caraway. Also, it has a pair of eyes, which I hope aren't the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, because I don't want to have to deal with Nick obsessed with other people's lives Caraway. So, let's get to the story proper. The book is set in mid-90s London, and has two main protagonists, Will Freeman, a 36-year-old bachelor, and Marcus Brewer, a lonely schoolboy described as introverted by his hippie suicidal mother, Fiona, despite his tendencies to bond and interact with people, but they usually don't reciprocate. He'll try to befriend people, but bullies start to bully them, and they stop hanging around with him. Will's father wrote a successful Christmas song, the royalties of which have given Will the ability to never have to work a day in his life. Thus he spends his huge amounts of free time immersing himself in 1990s culture, drinking, using soft drugs, and pursuing sexual relations with women. Of course, it's not like he'd be enriching his life, right? After a pleasant relationship with a single mother, Will comes up with the idea of attending a single-parent support group as a new way to pick up women, because he felt a different feeling while dating the single mother. For this purpose, he invents a 2-year-old son named Ned. Will then makes a number of acquaintances through the membership of the single-parents group, named SPAT, Single Parents Alone Together, two of which are Fiona and Marcus. Although their relationship is initially somewhat strained, they finally succeed in striking up a true friendship despite Will being largely uninterested early on. Marcus begins to show up at Will's house unannounced, and deduces that Ned doesn't exist. One day, Marcus is chased there by bullies throwing stuff at him, and Will scares them off and promises that he'll help Marcus fit in and stop the torture. Will is a socially aware and trendy person, and he aids Marcus in trying to fit into 1990s youth culture by encouraging him not to get his hair cut by his mother, buying him Adidas trainers, and introducing him to contemporary music. Marcus and Will's friendship strengthen through this. At school, he meets a girl named Ellie, who always gets in trouble for wearing a sweater with the face of Kurt Cobain on it.
Dudes! Kurt Cobain is awesome!
How's it hanging, 90s girl?
Everything's radical, dude!
Great. So what brings you here?
Well, you mentioned Nirvana. That's my cue to show up.
Really? That's interesting. And yeah, Nirvana is actually an integral part of the book, and plays into the climax. Of course, they completely screwed it up in the movie by removing all mentions of Nirvana.
That's more statical than radical.
It isn't. So, anything else?
Nope.
Well, rock on, 90s girl.
Hey, I'm 90s girl, and what you see is what you get. Wait, where'd the words go?
He also spends some time with his dad, who visits Marcus and Fiona for Christmas, together with his new girlfriend and her mother. He has a minor accident during some DIY work and breaks his collarbone. This prompts him into having a big think about the meaning of his life, and he summons Marcus to Cambridgeshire to see him. Marcus decides to bring Ellie along with him for support. However, he may have picked a bad day, it being the day after Kurt Cobain committed suicide. They're arrested on the way as Ellie smashes a shop window displaying a cardboard cutout of Cobain, accusing the shopkeeper of trying to make money out of him after his suicide. Meanwhile, to Will's despair, he falls in love with a woman named Rachel. Ironically, Rachel is a single mother, with a son named Alistair.
Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart,
who is the same age as Marcus. Will's emotional faculties are liberated, and he begins to shed his old skin of emotional indifference. Simultaneously, Marcus is becoming more typical of his age, and he begins to enjoy his life more. The novel ends during a three-way dialogue between Marcus, Will, and Fiona, where Will, to see if Marcus has truly changed, proposes the idea that he play a Joni Mitchell song on Fiona's piano, a musician that his mother was forcing onto him, which Fiona is, of course, enthusiastic of. However, Marcus responds saying he hates Joni Mitchell, whereby the book ends with Will musing on the fact that he knows that Marcus will be okay. So, that was About a Boy, and it was pretty good. The main theme of the book was that Will and Marcus both became more typical of their age groups and happier because of it. Will intends to marry Rachel at the end and embraces romantic normality, and Marcus enters the teenage phase in a healthy and typical fashion of a boy growing up in 1990s London. And I will say again, I was wrong about this book. I'm really sorry, Mr. Hornby. And I will say that out of all the characters, I really like Will, if only because he's a funny character, and come on. Who doesn't want to just sit around all day, yet have enough money to live? Anyway, next week we look at a Douglas Adams book. And I'm sure it'll be... Oh, it's another Dirk Gently book. Well, maybe it won't be slow and boring like the first one. I've returned. Oh, yeah, so put it down.
Huh. This is all your scientific stuff, is it?
Yes. All the stuff that was confiscated when I was put in prison.
Anyway, the thing has to cool off for a few hours.
Anyway, I want the transporter.
I don't think you should use it. I've modified it to ensure that my cybernetic enhancements won't be split out of me on transport.
I don't care.
I honestly don't recommend using it.
I'm sure it'll work. Just give it.
Fine. Here you go.
Okay. Here we go. Like Sano.